like agile is not fast enough, right? Now you have to be
Super agile.
yeah. You have to be careful about that though, right? Because it very quickly turns into wild west. If you just say, "Oh, I'm going to do big data. I'm going to throw away governance. I'm going to throw away integration. I'm just going to throw data out there and see what happens." That works very quickly, very shortly, but 6 months into it, 12 months into it, you are all of a sudden presented with a real problem, right? So building an organization for agility, I think, is the biggest thing that CIOs and C-level executives really have to do. And so you have to start with an agile environment first and introduce a big data on top of that. You can't assume that I do big data and all of a sudden I'm agile. It's usually the opposite, right? And designing an organization for agility is actually very, very hard work, right? And in many companies that I've been talking with over the last years, I find that they want to be agile, but they fall into this waterfall methodology all the time, right? They want to see roadmaps. They want to see, when can I release this product? And they haven't realized that there is a place for agile and there's a place for waterfall, and they need to live right next to each other. And it's no different with big data than it was with small data, but you need to really focus on that, and you need to train your people, you need to shape your organization, and you also need to establish funding models that support that.
The process is also great, but you also can slow you down, but you want the agility or super agile model, who's coined that new term. But one of the things that's interesting is living in Silicon Valley, and certainly in theCUBE, we've been here from the beginning, so we love to separate the hype and BS from the reality. That's and it's fun to see the hype, because that means people are hustling and trying to make things happen, certainly the startups. But one telltale sign this year that happened was at the Facebook Developer Conference, Mark Zuckerberg changed his flagship mantra: move fast, break stuff. Now, the DevOps culture certainly influenced cloud and Hadoop, right? It's clearly that eat glass, spit nails kind of mentality, but now you have Facebook, move fast, break stuff, to the new slogan, move fast with stable infrastructure. That to me is an admission.
You have to.
Of, this is serious.
Yes.
So comment on that and how that because that's modus operandi for the enterprise, isn't it?
See, you need to find that healthy mix, because move fast. When you are a very early startup, right? When you're very new into a market, you can break things very early on, but once you're established, people will not accept it. Facebook users won't accept if their profiles are broken or if their security is broken or whatnot, right? So you can't make mistakes. Same thing with executives. If the financial numbers of the companies change every day because somebody's agile with financial numbers, that's not good, right? And so you need to realize that you don't build a nuclear power plant in agile, you don't build an airplane in agile, but you build certain new products in agile, right? And certain new features. And I think companies that master that realize that I need governance and stability for certain parts, it's a spectrum. Agility is a spectrum. It's not an on-off switch. It's not like, I'm going to jump and now everything is agile, right? It goes from well-defined to very agile, and you need to build the capabilities for that. You need to build platforms for that. You mentioned DevOps. I'm a very strong believer that DevOps needs to come much, much more into big data and into the platforms. In fact, when we look at the unified data architecture, how we call it a Teradata, DevOps is a big topic for us, because right now, analytical applications are lacking the kind of DevOps that the world has developed around cloud solutions, right? And I think that's the next big thing that will allow even more agility with data, because it can't be that operations teams fight development or business user teams because they want to be agile, and today that happens way too often.
So talk a little bit, you were on the customer side before you moved over to Teradata. So now you've got that perspective, you're fresh on that other side.
Yes.
Talk about two things. One is, how high up the command chain does this push for agility as well as stability need to come? I mean, are CIOs getting it? Are the old school guys figuring it out, or does it have to come from even higher up the chain to push that? And my second question is, you said you worked at Sears before. eBay obviously is a data company. Sears, is still a retailer. How are you finding with your customer base that they're figuring out that they are actually all information companies that just happen to wrap it around a particular product or service?
So to your first point, I think that the push for agility needs to come even higher than the CIO. The CIO is one of the enablers, right? And so is the CMO, but ultimately it needs to be a goal of the CEO, and even sometimes of the board of a company, right? To really drive for rapid iteration. Now, they also need to realize that it's a balancing act, right? That you need to have good governance where it's important, right? You can't close the books of a public traded company on just some Excel spreadsheets or some data lake data. You need to have good integration for certain things. On the other side, you need to be able to prototype new ideas very quickly. One of the biggest problems that business communities, the CMOs, the pricing guys, the supply chain guys always have is when they have an idea and they go to IT, what does IT pull out? That try that requirements document. Go write down what you need. And at that point in time, the executives of the business units, they really don't know really what they want. They have an idea, they have a vision of where they want to go. Now they have to write a vision down into a binding contract, right? And so what happens? Big projects happen. I need all data in all possible combinations, with all reports possible, with all algorithms, and you end up going in these 18, 24-month cycles. And by the time they're done, two things usually happen. The first thing is like, well, that was interesting last summer. This summer I have a completely different macroeconomic environment. I need something completely different.
Or they just go swipe an Amazon account.
Yeah, exactly. Or they look at the data and they say, well, I didn't expect that. Now I have 50 new questions, right? And so this for product development around data, that hasn't worked. And I think that it's very important that the CIO is a big driver in that, but it goes beyond that, right? And what I've seen, and you talked about Sears, what we have done from within the analytics side is we pushed very hard for agility, but we also realized we need to do it with a purpose and with a methodology. You don't be agile by just throwing out documentation or by just landing data somewhere and hope that the person who landed it there is still there when you need that data. And so what we did is we actually took the entire development community and got them through Scrum training. So we said, might as well pick one methodology. We picked Scrum, we did that, but we also included business units into this, right? And we picked a couple lighthouse customers on the marketing side, for example, that were willing to go with us through that training, that were also willing to co-locate their people with ours. So they were sitting in the same conference rooms, in the same cubicles right next to each other, to really work next to each other and not have that traditional separation of here's IT and here's the business unit, and there's this requirements document firewall in between, right? That slows everything down.
How did that work? What were some of the interesting outcomes of that process for your own internal development?
What we have learned over the years, and that started many years ago at eBay. So I was 7 years at eBay, and I think as early as 2005, we started realizing that agility with data is paramount. We need to design for making that happen. And so one of the concepts very early on that we developed was, we realized we need to train people on Agile, but if you train somebody on Agile, and then they need to open a ticket and wait 14 days to get a response, it falls apart right there, right? So self-service, and so this is where the consumerization comes into it. This is what we learn from the Apples and the Facebooks. It's like self-service, self-service, self-service. And so the first thing that we built at eBay was the concept of virtual sandboxes, where you would come to our website, and we would have it as an internal product, and you would say, I want my own sandbox, and we had an SLA of in less than 5 minutes, you need to have your sandbox, and you need to have access to all the data that you're allowed to see, right? It needs to have security, needs to have governance wrapped around it, but we made it very easy for people to try something out right there on the production data, right? And so that was an important start, but we also started realizing that governance and time boxing are very important principles. So over the years, we realized that to be agile, you need a methodology, you need concepts like time boxing. If something takes longer than 30, 60, or 90 days, it's too big, right? And so we have done some of the largest projects at eBay, as well as at Sears, where we said, you know what? Let's do them in 90 days. And at first it's like, oh my God, that is crazy, right? You can't do this in 90 days.
You couldn't even commission the box.
Well,
days, right?
but the point here is that it forces you into a different mindset. It forces you into saying, you know what, I can only spend 20 days of the 90 days on performance tuning because I don't have more time. I don't have the luxury to go for a year and re-architect things because I won't get it done. But it allows you move very fast in very rapid iterations, learn every step, fail fast, right? Put something together and say, you know what, that's not working. Park it somewhere or throw it away. Because when projects get too big, the hurdle of accepting failure with data is just too big. Once you have sunk in $3 million, it's very hard to walk away from that and say, you know, that just didn't work out. And so, very important to bring these things together with methodologies, with platforms, with capabilities, like sandboxes, like self-service tools, and with online collaboration. I mean, one of the things that we also learned, and we first built at eBay was, we built what we call the data hub.